Are you tough?
Well, I don't know what that means. Tough? Do I look tough?
You know, I can't do this forever. I've been doing it since I was 21. As you move into your 80s, you say, hey, that's enough. That's enough.
When I was a little kid, I used to hang out with my grandfather, who was in his 90s, and I thought, Jesus, who the hell want to live this long?
What if the secret to timeless good looks was not just a chiseled jaw, but a story that never fades? Flickering through decades of glamour, we will witness icons whose faces defy age and expectations. Ever wondered what happened to your 90s crush? Some aged like fine wine, others disappeared like VHS tapes. From heartthrobs to heartbreaks, here are 75-plus actors who ruled the 70s to 90s and how they look now. We will uncover why some stars grew more magnetic with time and ask questions that challenge every assumption. Warning, some glow-ups might shock you. But first, let us rewind to the era when the heartthrob was born. The golden age of heartthrobs. What made a 70s idol? Was it the hair, the mystery, or something deeper that made a 70s star irresistible? In a decade awash in bell-bottoms and disco balls, magazine covers thundered with the promise of new heartthrobs. Game's radar crowned Al Pacino among the 32 greatest 70s actors. At the same time, Harper's Bazaar hailed Robert Redford as a timeless standard. Archival film stills roar to life beside glossy people spreads. The IMDb list of top 70s actors further cemented the stature of these icons. Could these images alone spark generations of devotion? The answer lies in a bold new standard of desire that went beyond mere looks. The anti-hero rewrote the rules of attraction. Pacino's glare in The Godfather and Nicholson's erratic grin set fan obsessions ablaze. Their flaws became fuel, their mystery the magnet. Eastwood's silence in Dirty Harry and Redford's windswept charm made the rugged look feel sacred. Posters turned bedrooms into altars of wild appeal. Travolta's disco-era glow only deepened the craze. Could that level of devotion happen without the era's raw electricity? These men were not just admired, they were mythologized. Fashion and film fused to forge the ultimate idol image. Bell-bottom silhouettes paired with aviator sunglasses created a look both rebellious and romantic. Critics described the era's aesthetic as sensual frontier style that blurred the lines between rugged and refined. Would you have had a crush on a 70s idol, or do you prefer today's stars? As we gaze at those iconic frames, we must ask which face still commands your heart. But who were the faces that truly defined this golden age? The icons of the 70s, from Pacino to Redford. Al Pacino. Some faces never fade when they redefine an era's idea of beauty. Al Pacino exploded onto screens in 1972 with The Godfather, turning brooding intensity into a new bar for leading men. Fans described his dark good looks as a macho twinkle that danced in every close-up. Reported speech praised his ability to channel raw emotion without a single flourish of vanity. Rumor insists Pacino once demanded his own makeup mirror on set to study how light carved his cheekbones. Which of his roles would you reimagine in today's blockbuster? Robert Redford. Robert Redford embodied sun-kissed allure in The Sting and The Way We Were. He carried magazine covers like badges of honor and founded Sundance to champion indie voices. According to People Out Here, his blonde hair and blue-eyed gaze are credited with launching 1,000 fan letters. A persistent fan theory claims Redford secretly coached young actors off-camera to preserve that outsider mystique. Could a modern star survive under such quietly cultivated pressure? Burt Reynolds. With Smokey and the Bandit, Burt Reynolds turned rugged masculinity into a cultural craze. He leaned into a signature mustache and cowboy boots that became his on-screen uniform. Reported speech hailed his grin as proof that charm needed a touch of danger. A popular rumor holds that Reynolds once drove a real Trans Am through a studio backlot just to thrill the crew. Would you dare to replicate that stunt today? Paul Newman. Paul Newman combined ice blue eyes with a philanthropic soul that outlived his most challenging roles. He raced cars for charity and launched Newman's Own to funnel profits to those in need. Reported speech celebrates his dual identity as actor and activist. Fan lore whispers that Newman refused to shave until a Hollywood producer agreed to match his first $1 million donation. What modern celebrity would make such a bold stand before a camera? Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood crafted stoic brilliance as Dirty Harry and displayed rugged grit in the good, the bad, and the ugly. He let silence speak louder than words and made squinting into the sun an art form. Reported speech notes that directors admired his natural command behind the lens. A whispered theory suggests Eastwood improvised his toughest dialogue on the fly to keep co-stars off balance. Could any actor today match that level of spontaneous edge? Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson shattered the perfect boy mold with roles in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and The Shining. He injected eccentric magnetism into every frame and proved that unpredictability could be irresistible. Reported speech labeled him Hollywood's wild card. Legend says Nicholson once improvised a taunting laugh so chilling that the entire set fell silent. Which of his characters would haunt you most in a midnight screening? Rock Hudson. Rock Hudson maintained romantic lead status into the 1980s and became one of the first to challenge Hollywood's age limits. He starred in giant VB-sized epics like Giant and charmed co-stars with a warm humility. Reported speech honored his trailblazing role as a gay icon after his untimely passing. A fan rumor claims Hudson wrote secret letters to upset fans who doubted his sincerity. Who today carries that same quiet strength on screen? Which of these legends would you cast in a modern blockbuster? The templates they set still echo through today's cinema, but the 80s brought a new kind of charm. Who stole the spotlight next? The 80s, big hair, big stars, and the blockbuster heartthrob. The 80s were when everything got bigger, including the heartthrobs. This was the decade when swagger became cinematic currency. Hair was high, jeans were tight, and movie stars did not just act, but they radiated. America was shifting, Wall Street was rising, and MTV was freshly hitting the airwaves. And on those glowing VHS tapes were the faces that defined desire. Mel Gibson. Take Mel Gibson, for example. Before tabloids etched a different image, he was Mad Max turned mainstream magnet. His breakout in Gallipoli gave him gravitas, but Lethal Weapon cemented him as the troubled charmer. With her wild-eyed, wounded, and magnetic pose, people could not stop watching. Women were crushed while men copied the mullet. And somewhere in between, Hollywood realized danger could be desirable. Tom Cruise. Then came Tom Cruise, short in stature, colossal in presence. Top Gun lifted him, literally, into icon status. That volleyball scene alone became its own legend. Off-screen, Cruise's smile launched 1,000 crushes. On-screen, he balanced reckless youth with impossible charm. Whether sliding across the floor in socks or outmaneuvering Soviets in a fighter jet, Cruise embodied confidence in motion. Richard Gere. And while Cruise was the daredevil, Richard Gere was the slow burn. American Gigolo turned him into fashion's favorite fantasy, but an officer and a gentleman gave him an emotional edge. When he lifted Deborah Winger off that factory floor, hearts soared with them. Gere's appeal was not about flash. It was that mysterious quiet, the sense that he had secrets and you wanted in. Patrick Swayze. But the 80s also had room for vulnerability wrapped in brawn. Patrick Swayze did not fit the mold. He broke, rebuilt, and added a dance number. In Dirty Dancing, he moved like danger in denim. The nobody puts baby in a corner line? Not just dialogue, but a declaration. He brought ballet grace to action star grit, and viewers could not look away. Every lift, every look, every shirtless scene proved that cinema's bad boy had rhythm, and it hit differently. Denzel Washington. And then there was Denzel Washington, rising fast. His roles in A Soldier's Story and Cry Freedom showed range, but it was clear that this man had presence. By the time Glory dropped in 1989, Denzel had everyone's attention. He brought seriousness to the screen, but also undeniable charisma. Intelligence, strength, and that steel-eyed stare on this guy were unshakable. Unlike some of his contemporaries, Denzel never needed to pose. He commanded. The common thread here was confidence, complexity, and a kind of cinematic sex appeal that refused to be one note. This was not about six-pack abs or slow-motion runs, although, sure, there was plenty of that. It was about how these men carried themselves, messy, masculine, and magnetic. Did you know Tom Cruise almost did not get Top Gun because producers thought he was too clean-cut? That is the kind of behind-the-scenes grit that made these heartthrobs legendary. But hold up. If the 80s were loud, the 90s had something else up their sleeves. Cool confidence and the rise of global desire. So, who became the next faces of fantasy? You might be surprised. The 90s. Teen idols, TV crushes, and global icons. It began with a smirk, a glance from beneath tousled hair, a brooding stare on a VHS cover that made video store aisles feel like altars. The 90s took the heartthrob formula and sharpened it into an obsession. Teen magazines sold out, posters were currency, and one name could silence an entire sleepover. Johnny Depp. Once a clean-cut TV rebel on 21 Jump Street, Johnny Depp abandoned the teen dream straitjacket for something darker. By the time he floated through Edward Scissorhands, fans were not just swooning, they were intrigued. Here was a man who chose roles like riddles. Today, Depp remains a mystery, wrapped in layers of vintage scarves, court cases, and cult followings. He aged, but never softened. Brad Pitt. Then came Brad Pitt. Thelma and Louise gave him a few minutes of screen time and a permanent spot in pop culture's bedroom shrine. His cheekbones launched 10,000 gossip covers, but behind that smile, Pitt was quietly plotting range. Legends of the Fall, Seven, Fight Club. Each role peeled away a layer, revealing grit behind the gloss. Now, in his 60s, he is producing prestige films, sipping iced coffee with a painter's calm. The abs may fade, but Pitt's star only burns brighter. Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves was never the loudest in the room. He did not need to be. His mix of martial arts precision and philosophical stillness made him the thinking fan's action hero. Speed was his breakout, but The Matrix made him immortal. Today, fans worship him less for his roles and more for his reputation as a humble, kind, unshakably remarkable man. Social media turned him into a meme, and then into a movement. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck arrived like a two-man storm. Childhood friends from Boston, they cracked Hollywood's code by writing Good Will Hunting. Damon had quiet eyes and the everyman charm. Affleck had the swagger, the square jaw. Studios scrambled to separate them, but fans liked them best together. Damon stayed consistent. Affleck battled demons and won back fans with Air and The Way Back. Now in their 50s, they are proof that teen idols can become Hollywood titans. Luke Perry. TV2 was minting stars faster than magazines could keep up. Beverly Hills 90210 gave us Luke Perry's tragic Cool. Saved by the Bell had Mark-Paul Gosselaar's boy next door appeal. Baywatch was less about plot and more about chiseled abs. That was the likes of David Charvet, Michael Bergen, even a young Jason Momoa before the Ink and Armor. These men dominated both screens and lockers. International stars finally had a path to global fame. With his smoldering Spanish allure, Antonio Banderas danced from Desperado to The Mask of Zorro. Meanwhile, Takeshi Kaneshiro, who was part Taiwanese and part Japanese, was quietly amassing a cult following in Asia. He rarely chased Hollywood. Well, he did not have to because his mystique was global. Fan polls today still rank these names high. Brad, Keanu, and Johnny remain active, visible, and oddly untouched by time. Instagram comments under throwback photos echoed the same sentiment. How did he not age? But the bigger question lingers. Did these stars look last, or did they reinvent themselves surprisingly? Underrated icons you forgot were hot. Hollywood rarely gives second chances, but these men never asked for one. Their glow-up stories unfolded away from the spotlight, slowly burning into something more profound than just beauty. These were not the magazine cover kings of the era. They were scene stealers, the kind who arrived quietly, left an impression, then returned years later, aged into something unexpectedly magnetic. This is not about who screamed heartthrob. This is about who whispered it, and somehow lingered longer. Treat Williams. Treat Williams never played by the leading man rules. In the late 70s and early 80s, he walked into frame with the kind of bone structure that could stop time, but it was his intensity that turned heads. Hair made him a counterculture icon, but it was Prince of the City that proved he was not built for light romance. He had something stormier, heavier. Then Hollywood looked away. By the time he returned in roles like the gruff but golden-hearted father in Everwood, Williams had traded that youthful gleam for a rugged, lived-in elegance. Viewers no longer saw a rebel. They saw a man who had survived rebellion. His presence deepened, not diminished. And long after the red carpets moved on, audiences noticed something else. He still had that gaze, the one that said he had secrets. Harry Hamlin. Harry Hamlin entered the pantheon not by flexing muscles or chasing franchises, but by standing still, toga-clad, beneath the gods. As Perseus in Clash of the Titans, he looked like he had stepped out of a Renaissance sculpture. Not just handsome, mythic. His jawline was a conversation starter, and his eyes carried a kind of classical detachment. And yet, his career moved sideways. More television than film, more legal drama than epic adventure. It did not matter. Hamlin aged into his features like they were tailored for time. By the time he reappeared in Mad Men and reality television, he no longer resembled a demigod. He looked like a mogul, understated, sharp, and always one camera angle away from reclaiming his spotlight. The industry may have moved on, but viewers remembered. Billy D. Williams. Some men age. And then there is Billy D. Williams, who has always seemed to age in slow motion. From his first slow drawl in Lady Sings the Blues to the cape-swishing cool of Lando Calrissian, Williams defined suave for an entire generation. He was not just the smoothest man in the galaxy, he was the smoothest man in the room, period. And he never needed to prove it. His looks were smooth jazz, effortless, rhythmic, always on tempo. Decades later, when he returned to Star Wars in The Rise of Skywalker, it felt less like a comeback and more like a continuation. He never left. His voice still rolled like velvet. His charm still lingered in the air long after the credits rolled. Even now, fans say his presence reminds them of a time when cool had manners. Dermot Mulroney. Dermot Mulroney never exploded onto the scene. He crept in, one soulful performance at a time, one glance beneath messy bangs. In the 90s, he had the look of someone who just stepped off a motorcycle and into a poetry reading. My Best Friend's Wedding nearly typecast him as the sweet guy caught in the middle, but the truth was far edgier. Off-screen, his roles hinted at something less polished. There was a darkness in his eyes that no romantic comedy could scrub clean, and as time passed, the edges sharpened. His hair silvered. His leather jackets fit tighter. Today, Mulroney does not beg to be noticed. He walks into a scene like he owns the space, not the spotlight. And somehow, that makes him even more dangerous. Lou Diamond Phillips. Lou Diamond Phillips had cheekbones that should have had their own agent. In La Bamba, he played Richie Valens with the kind of emotional honesty that could wreck a viewer in 2 lines. The tragedy was always baked into his beauty. He had that melancholy handsomeness that never looked quite at ease. And that is what made him unforgettable. Hollywood tried to place him in boxes, ethnic roles, action flicks, quiet side characters, but Phillips kept evolving. His later turns in Longmire and voice acting showed a kind of range that many pretty faces never unlock. Today, his face tells a different story, one of resilience, of fight. And yes, those cheekbones, still sharp enough to draw blood. Breaking barriers, diversity, and new archetypes. Not all heartthrobs fit the mold, and that is exactly what made them unforgettable. In an era where Hollywood once clung to cookie-cutter ideals of leading men, the square jaws, blue eyes, and beach blonde charm, some actors crashed through those doors with grit and something more primal. They did not just steal scenes, they rewrote the script. And for many, their very presence on screen challenged what handsome was supposed to mean. Take Denzel Washington. He did not smile to win hearts. He stared through the lens like it owed him something. Rising in the 80s with roles like A Soldier's Story and Cry Freedom, he delivered beauty wrapped in seriousness. In Glory, he did not need soft lighting or slow-motion walks. He brought elegance to rage and made pain magnetic. For millions watching, he proved that strength and intellect could outshine sculpted abs and surfer waves. Morgan Freeman. Then came Morgan Freeman, older, quieter, and defiantly against type. In an industry addicted to youth, he became iconic at an age when most leading men were being shown the door. He was never sold as a pinup. Yet by the time he delivered lines in Driving Miss Daisy and The Shawshank Redemption, something shifted. People were drawn to his serenity. to the wisdom in his voice. Handsome, suddenly, was not about cheekbones. It was about gravitas. Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson entered the room like a storm. You did not crush on him. You respected him. Pulp Fiction did not cast him to melt hearts. Yet audiences watched, fascinated. His authority became its own form of attraction. The voice, the stare, the electric unpredictability. He was not just desirable. He was necessary in every frame. Eddie Murphy. Meanwhile, comedy broke its own mold with Eddie Murphy. The charm was all there. High energy, fast talking, mischief in every grin. But it was packaged in defiance. Beverly Hills Cop did not just entertain. It made studio executives rethink what a leading man could look and sound like. He did not need the typical heartthrob silhouette. He had something far rarer, and that's control of the room. Jackie Schroff. And while Hollywood wrestled with its own biases, Bollywood offered another kind of rebellion. Dharmendra emerged in the 70s as a striking contrast, broad-shouldered, brooding, yet profoundly tender. His masculinity carried softness, and that duality was lethal. Jackie Schroff followed, a working-class dream with sleepy eyes and streetwise swagger. His look was never polished, but audiences adored him for it. In India, these men shifted the standards. They were not just admired, they were trusted. Together, these icons did not just act. They unlocked the frame for future generations. Today's definition of handsome owes them a debt because they gave audiences permission to want more than the surface. So, which of these legends opened the most doors? Legends who reinvented hotness in their 50s, 60s, and beyond. The rules were supposed to be simple. Good looks fade. Hollywood forgets. And once a man hits 50, his leading man days are over. Or so the old playbook claimed. Stanley Tucci. Then Stanley Tucci walked into frame with rimmed glasses, a perfectly cut suit, and a Negroni in hand. And the internet simply melted. For years, Tucci had played supporting roles. The sarcastic best friend, the tightly wound bureaucrat, the quiet intellectual. But somewhere between The Devil Wears Prada and his viral cocktail videos, the narrative changed. His bald head became a badge of honor. His deep voice turned recipes into seduction. Fans began whispering online that this man was not just attractive. He was irresistible. Tucci did not cling to youth. He embodied a new kind of confidence that made older man a fantasy, not a footnote. Mark Harmon. But Stanley was not alone. Once the all-American golden boy, Mark Harmon, somehow morphed into a silver-haired patriarch without losing an ounce of intrigue. In the 1980s, he was people's sexiest man alive. Sun-kissed skin, quarterback build, the charm of a man who knew he could get away with anything. Fast forward to NCIS, and the charisma had deepened. The boyish smirk matured into a cool detachment. His Gibbs character rarely smiled, yet audiences were hooked. It was not about being approachable anymore. It was about quiet dominance. Fans did not just watch for the crimes. They tuned in for that sharp jawline, the intensity in his stare, and the slow, deliberate way he delivered justice. Even in reruns, he holds court. Bryan Cranston. Then came Bryan Cranston, the curveball. No one pegged the Malcolm in the Middle dad as future sex symbol material. And yet, when Breaking Bad dropped, everything shifted. The hair disappeared. The glasses stayed. But it was the power that changed him. Walter White was not hot because he was young. He was hot because he was dangerous, because he was in control. Cranston showed what happens when charisma outperforms cheekbones. His transformation proved that dominance, vulnerability, and purpose could overtake superficial beauty and leave a deeper mark. A man once considered harmless became the blueprint for how late-life roles could unlock unexpected thirst. Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum, though, defies even the twist. He was never traditional, never tried to be. His appeal was weird, wiry, and challenging to define in the 80s. The Fly, Jurassic Park. He was always the clever one, the talkative one, the oddball who somehow got the girl. But instead of fading into cult status, Goldblum only got bolder with age. By the time he entered his 60s, he had become a full-blown fashion icon. Patterned suits, jazz albums, that unmistakable laugh. He leaned into eccentricity and came out the other side as pure sex appeal. There were no rules left, only Goldblum. For the fans who grew up idolizing teenage rebels and poster-perfect smiles, these transformations hit differently. Because these were not pretty boys trying to hang on, these were men, and they were getting better with time. It makes you wonder, what does it really mean to be handsome? What these late bloomers taught us is that attraction is not frozen in time. So while the younger stars burned fast and bright, these men simmered. And when their moment finally came, they lit the whole room on fire. The ones who never tried, but still had it. Sam Elliott. By the time Sam Elliott sauntered onto screens in the early 1970s, the Hollywood playbook had already been written. Clean-cut jawlines, boyish grins, and leading man energy ran the show. But Sam rewrote the margins. He brought something older, slower, and infinitely more grounded. His voice did not ask for attention, it lowered it. His mustache became its own form of punctuation, a signature that spoke even when he did not. Directors kept calling not for a flash of youth, but for a burnished masculinity. Fans, mostly unaware of how deeply rooted his cowboy calm truly ran, began citing him in unexpected places, from Coors commercials to late-night fantasies. And yet, in every interview, Sam dismissed the fuss. Fame, for him, was never the goal. Still, fame had other plans. Forrest Whitaker. Forrest Whitaker never fit the mold. That much was clear from his earliest roles. He did not arrive on screen to seduce. He came to listen, to absorb, to haunt. Even in minor parts, there was something weighty about his presence, something that pulled the viewer closer. Not traditionally handsome, but deeply magnetic. His performance in Bird cracked open new territory, where pain and genius danced beneath the surface. Later, The Last King of Scotland would make critics scramble for new language. But long before the Oscars, Forrest already had fans, not for his looks alone, but for that feeling he left behind. A subtle gravity, a soul you could not quite name. William Peterson. In the television world of the 80s and 90s, where beach bodies and booming theme songs ruled prime time, William Peterson did something different. He whispered, he brooded, he leaned into quietude. His breakout came not with CSI, but with Manhunter, a thriller that cast him not as the action hero, but as the thinker. A profiler who could carry trauma in the tilt of his brow. Later, when CSI made him a household name, older viewers rewatched his early work and realized he had always had it. The appeal was never loud. It was never forced. Peterson invited you in, leaving you wondering how you missed him the first time. Danny Glover. Danny Glover never had to prove himself. That was the allure. From places in the heart to lethal weapon, he brought a steady, lived-in masculinity that never begged to be admired. And yet, he was. Glover was not marketed as the crush. But somehow, in the background of explosive buddy cop moments, he became the one viewers remembered. Not because he flexed, but because he stood firm. Because he looked like someone who knew things and was kind enough not to say them out loud. His presence aged like carved oak. The world moved faster. Danny stayed rooted. But not all charm came wrapped in calm. Some of it came through a crooked smile, a sideways glance, and the unapologetic confidence of someone who had stopped asking for permission. Steve Buscemi. Steve Buscemi was never supposed to be a sex symbol. And yet, there he was, scene-stealing, smirking, refusing to be forgotten. With his bug-eyed gaze and unpredictable energy, Buscemi walked into rooms like he already knew the punchline. Fargo, Reservoir Dogs, Boardwalk Empire, each proof that he was not just watchable, he was wanted. Women admitted it in whispers. Men studied it with confusion. How did this man, who looked nothing like Hollywood's standard, keep winning the screen? The answer was simple: confidence, audacity, and a refusal to be embarrassed by either. Christopher Walken. Christopher Walken confused people. Then he fascinated them. By the time he danced through Weapon of Choice in that iconic Spike Jonze video, it was already clear Walken was in a league of his own. He could play terrifying, tender, ridiculous, and seductive all at once. In his youth, he had the bone structure. But it was not until age had weathered him a bit that fans began to whisper. That hair, that voice, that sense that anything could happen in the next breath. Handsome? Maybe not in a poster sense, but in the kind that stays with you long after the credits. John Malkovich. And then came John Malkovich, the intellectual's heartthrob. On paper, he was never the obvious choice, but in every role, he redefined sensuality, slow diction, elusive emotion, a gaze that suggested layers you could never reach. Dangerous liaisons turned him into a villain worth falling for. Being John Malkovich twisted his allure into satire. Still, the truth was obvious. He did not play sexy. He was sexy. In the way he refused to cater. In the way he claimed his space. Women understood it immediately. Men learned over time. These were the ones who did not chase the cover. And still, they lasted. So, which of these legends flipped the script on aging and still got that magnetic pull? Drop your thoughts below. Who's your unexpected zaddy? Your forever heartthrob? Or the one you think rewrote the playbook on hotness? Let's get this debate rolling. Ciao.